"Get out of my seat, kid." The tattooed man's voice sliced through the cabin as his massive frame loomed over Jamal Washington. A hush fell across first class. Jamal gripped the armrest, refusing to move, even as the man's sneer deepened. "You don't belong here." A flight attendant hesitated, eyes darting between them, then looked away. The sting of injustice burned hotter than the stares around him. Somewhere on the tarmac below, a private jet had just landed, carrying a man whose arrival would change everything. But up here, Jamal stood alone, moments away from reclaiming more than just his seat. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this young man's dignity gets reclaimed in the most unexpected way. The morning had started like any other for 17-year-old Jamal Washington. He woke up at 5:30, completed his morning workout routine, and reviewed his presentation notes one final time before packing his laptop into his backpack. Outside his modest South Chicago apartment, the November air carried the first hints of winter, but Jamal barely noticed as he kissed his grandmother goodbye. "You call me the minute you land?" you hear Gloria Washington insisted, adjusting his collar with weathered hands that had raised not only her son Elijah, but now her grandson too. "Yes, ma'am," Jamal replied with the respect that had been instilled in him since childhood. Jamal's acceptance to Westridge Academy 2 years ago had changed everything. The prestigious private school had recognized his exceptional aptitude for computer science and offered him a full scholarship. Every day he navigated between two worlds: the working-class neighborhood where he'd grown up and the elite corridors of Westridge where most students arrived in luxury vehicles and spoke casually about summer homes and European place. Vacations. At school, Jamal maintained a careful distance from most of his classmates, not because they were overtly hostile, although some definitely were, but because the cultural chasm between them felt insurmountable at times. Still, he'd found his place in the computer science lab, where his talent spoke louder than his background. His latest achievement was developing an app called Bridge Connect, designed to match underserved communities with educational resources. The app had caught the attention of Tech Forward, one of the largest technology conferences in the country, earning Jamal a coveted speaking slot to present his innovation. What few people at Westridge knew was that Jamal's father was Elijah Washington, founder and CEO of Washington Innovations. The self-made billionaire had started his company in a garage 20 years ago and built it into a tech empire. But Elijah's success had come with a steep personal cost. His marriage to Jamal's mother had collapsed under the weight of his ambition, and his relationship with his son consisted mainly of brief phone calls and occasional dinners, whenever Elijah was actually in Chicago. Jamal had intentionally kept his father's identity private at school. He wanted to be judged on his own merits, not his father's wealth. It also helped that he carried his mother's maiden name, making the connection less obvious. The scholarship was legitimate. Jamal had earned it through his academic excellence, not his father's influence. When planning his trip to the conference in San Francisco, Jamal had declined his father's offer to use the private jet. "I want to do this on my own," he had insisted during their last phone call. The jet's more efficient Elijah had countered his voice, betraying mild irritation at his son's stubborn independence. "I know, Dad, but this is my project. My presentation. I need to do it my way." After a long pause, Elijah had reluctantly agreed. "Fine. I've got meetings in Tokyo anyway, but were realized reluctant mating sins. Fine." Now, as Jamal headed to O'Hare International Airport, he felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. This conference could open doors for his app and future career. He checked in at the American Airlines counter, surprised when the attendant's eyes widened slightly as she processed his information. "Mr. Washington, it seems there's been an upgrade to your ticket. You'll be flying first class today." Jamal blinked in confusion. "There must be a mistake. I booked economy." The attendant shook her head, smiling. "No mistake, the system shows an automatic upgrade, perhaps frequent flyer status. Jamal knew he had no such status, but decided not to question his good fortune. Perhaps this was his father's way of supporting, without interfering, a silent compromise. Security was a breeze with his first-class boarding pass, and before long, Jamal found himself settling into a spacious seat at the front of the plane. He felt somewhat out of place amid the luxury adjusting his simple jeans and Washington Innovations hoodie, the one gift from his father that he actually used regularly. He placed his backpack carefully under the seat in front of him, removed his laptop, and began reviewing his presentation one more time. The opportunity to showcase Bridge Connect to industry leaders made him both nervous and thrilled. More importantly, he hoped to secure funding to expand the app's reach to more communities across the country. As other first-class passengers boarded, Jamal kept his head down, focusing on his work. He never saw the trouble coming until it was already too late. The commotion near the front of the plane drew Jamal's attention away from his laptop screen. Two men were boarding their muscular frames, barely fitting through the narrow airplane entrance. Both sported extensive tattoos, visible beneath their tight-fitting designer clothes, their necks thick with veins that spoke of rigorous training regimens and possibly performance enhancers. Finally, the taller one said, his voice carrying across the cabin as he high-fived a flight attendant who clearly recognized him. Competition's over time to relax. Jamal returned his focus to his presentation, making minor adjustments to his slides. The stats needed to be compelling. He wanted to show how educational inequality created ripple effects throughout communities. "Excuse me, you're in my seat." Jamal looked up to find both bodybuilders standing in the aisle beside him. The shorter one, whose name tag from some event still hung around his neck reading Marcus Reed, was staring down at him with unconcealed displeasure. "I don't think so," Jamal replied politely, reaching for his boarding pass. "I'm in 2A. Let me see that." Marcus demanded, snatching the document from Jamal's hand before he could react. He examined it with exaggerated scrutiny before exchanging glances with his companion. "Brent, look at this. Seems like they're letting anyone up here these days." Brent Thompson, whose name Jamal would later learn, chuckled and adjusted his designer sunglasses. Probably some diversity program or something. Jamal felt his chest tighten, but kept his expression neutral. He'd experienced this before. The immediate assumption that he couldn't possibly belong in certain spaces unless it was through some form of charity or quota. "My boarding pass clearly shows this seat assignment," Jamal stated calmly, extending his hand for its return. Marcus reluctantly handed it back, but didn't move. "These are supposed to be our seats. We always sit together when we fly." "I'm sorry, but I was assigned this seat." Jamal repeated, maintaining eye contact despite the growing discomfort of the situation. Other first-class passengers were watching now, some with discomfort, others with mild curiosity, but none intervening. A flight attendant named Heather, according to her name tag, approached with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" she asked, her gaze darting between the imposing bodybuilders and Jamal. "Yeah, there's a problem," Marcus said before Jamal could respond. "We're supposed to be sitting together. We're coming back from the National Physique Championship." "I took second place." He flexed slightly, as if this achievement entitled him to special treatment. Heather turned to Jamal with a practiced smile. "Sir, would you mind moving to another seat in first class? We'd like to accommodate these gentlemen who travel with us frequently." The implication was clear. Jamal was an interloper in this space. While the bodybuilders were valued customers, the familiar sting of discrimination washed over him. But years of navigating predominantly white spaces had taught him to choose his battles carefully. "Are there other window seats available?" Jamal asked, trying to find a reasonable compromise. The flight attendant glanced around. "We have a middle seat in row 4. "That's not even a fair exchange," Jamal pointed out. Just then, the captain announced a 30-minute delay due to air traffic congestion. The news caused a collective groan throughout the cabin. "Perfect," Marcus muttered sarcastically, then fixed his gaze back on Jamal. "Look, kid, just move so we can get settled. Don't make this difficult." "I paid for this seat," Jamal said, then corrected himself. "Actually, I was upgraded to this seat. It's mine for this flight." Upgraded? Brent scoffed. Yeah, right. What are you, 16? Flying alone to visit Daddy? I'm 17 and I'm traveling to present at the Tech Forward conference. Jamal replied, his patience wearing thin. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. Listen, you don't belong up here with us. First class has standards. The racial undertone was unmistakable. Jamal felt a flash of anger, but remembered his grandmother's advice. Don't let them see they got to you. That's giving away your power. Heather, the flight attendant, seemed to sense the escalating tension. So perhaps you could show me your boarding pass again. Sometimes there are mix-ups in the system. Jamal handed over his boarding pass, once more frustration mounting as she examined it as if searching for a forgery. Around them, other passengers pretended to be absorbed in magazines or phones, the cowardice of bystanders on full display. This seems to be in order, but Heather hesitated, glancing at the bodybuilders. These gentlemen are platinum members with our airline. Perhaps we could offer you a voucher for your next flight if you'd be willing to move. You're asking me to give up my assigned seat because they want to sit together. Jamal clarified, making sure everyone within earshot understood what was happening. It would be a courtesy, Heather replied, her tone suggesting Jamal was being unreasonable. Marcus smirked, sensing victory. Come on, kid, be cool about this. An older businessman across the aisle finally spoke up. The young man has a valid ticket for that seat. Why should he move? Jamal appreciated the intervention, but didn't want the situation to escalate further. Look, I'll move if there's an equivalent seat available, a window seat in first class. There's nothing else available in first class except that middle seat, Heather admitted. Then I'm staying in my assigned seat, Jamal said firmly. The confrontation was drawing even more attention now. A flight attendant from coach class had come forward to see what was causing the delay in seating. Is there a problem here? The male flight attendant asked. No problem, Jamal said quickly. I'm in my assigned seat and I'll be staying here. Marcus's face darkened with anger. You think you're special, don't you? Got some upgrade, and now you think you belong with the adults. Brent placed a restraining hand on his friend's arm, but added, maybe the kid should fly coach where he belongs. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Jamal knew it. He had two choices: stand his ground and risk further confrontation, or surrender his rightful seat to avoid trouble. Neither option felt good. Final boarding call for American Airlines flight 1287 to San Francisco, came the announcement over the intercom. All passengers, please take your seats immediately. The pressure was mounting. All eyes were on Jamal, now waiting to see what he would do. You know what, fine? I'll move. The words escaped Jamal's lips before he could reconsider. Something in Marcus's increasingly aggressive stance triggered warning signals in his mind. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. The situation was becoming potentially dangerous. As Jamal began gathering his belongings, Marcus smirked triumphantly at Brent. See, problem solved. Jamal slowly placed his laptop back into his backpack, his movements deliberate as he fought to maintain his composure. This familiar feeling, the need to retreat for his own safety, despite being in the right, burned in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd faced this choice, and the bitter taste of surrender hadn't gotten easier with experience. Sorry for the inconvenience, Heather said, though her tone lacked genuine remorse. I can show you to your new seat. As Jamal stood to leave, Marcus deliberately bumped against him, causing Jamal to stumble backward. His backpack knocked against the armrest, and his laptop slid out, clattering onto the floor between the seats. Whoa, careful there, Marcus said with mock concern. Butterfingers. Jamal dropped to his knees, heart racing, as he retrieved his computer. Opening it revealed a spiderweb of cracks across the screen. His presentation. The culmination of months of work, now at risk. My laptop, Jamal said, his voice tight with distress. You broke my screen. I didn't touch your stuff, Marcus replied immediately, hands raised in feigned innocence. You dropped it. Brent chuckled as he settled into what had been Jamal's seat. Should be more careful with your toys, kid. Jamal looked to Heather, hoping for some acknowledgement of what had just happened. He knocked into me intentionally. My presentation for the conference is on this laptop. Heather's eyes flickered with momentary sympathy before professionalism reasserted itself. "I didn't see contact, sir. Perhaps it was the turbulence from people moving around." The plane wasn't moving. There was no turbulence, just the willful blindness of someone choosing the path of least resistance. "I need to file a report," Jamal insisted, his voice rising slightly. "This is property damage." A middle-aged woman across the aisle averted her eyes, suddenly fascinated by the safety card in her seat pocket. The businessman who had spoken up earlier now appeared absorbed in his newspaper. "No witnesses, no allies." "Sir, we need to complete boarding," Heather said firmly. "I can take your information after takeoff and file an incident report, but right now, I need you to take your seat so we can depart." Marcus leaned back in his newly acquired seat, spreading his arms across both armrests. "Better hurry along, kid. You're holding up the flight." The walk of shame began. Laptop clutched against his chest, backpack slung over one shoulder. Jamal followed Heather through first class. Each step felt heavier than the last. He could feel eyes on him, some sympathetic, most just relieved the disturbance was ending. As they passed the boundary between first class and economy, Jamal heard Brent's carrying whisper, "Guess he found out where he belongs." Several passengers in economy shifted uncomfortably as Jamal was led to his new seat 14E, a middle seat, wedged between a snoring elderly man and a woman who barely looked up from her romance novel as he approached. "This is your seat," Heather announced unnecessarily. "I'll come back after takeoff to take your details about the laptop incident." Jamal nodded silently, sliding into the cramped space. The contrast between this seat and his original assignment was stark. No legroom, no complimentary drink, waiting, no hot towel service. But the physical discomfort pad in comparison to the humiliation burning through him. As Heather walked away, Jamal closed his eyes and took several deep breaths. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. "You're a Washington. Act like it." But what did that even mean? Now his father would have never tolerated such treatment. Elijah Washington would have made a scene, leveraged his name, his wealth, his power. He would have owned the situation. Jamal had chosen a different path, swallowing the insult, retreating from confrontation. The weight of that choice sat heavily on his chest as he examined his damaged laptop. The screen still functioned, but the cracks made portions of his presentation difficult to read. He would need to find a way to repair it before tomorrow. The memories surfaced unbidden, the time in 8th grade when a teacher accused him of cheating because his test score was too high for someone from his neighborhood. The shopping mall security guard who followed him through every store while ignoring his white friends. The college recruiter who suggested he consider less competitive schools despite his perfect GPA. Each incident had taught him to modulate his responses, to carefully calculate when to stand firm and when to step back. Survival strategies. But sitting in that cramped middle seat, Jamal wondered if he'd calculated wrong this time. Should he have held his ground, forced the airline staff to physically remove him? If they wanted him out of his rightful seat, would that have made any difference? The cabin lights dimmed as the plane finally began to taxi. Jamal stared at his reflection in the cracked screen, barely recognizing the defeated expression on his own face. His presentation wasn't just about an app anymore. It represented his vision for addressing systemic inequities, creating bridges between communities. Now that vision was literally fractured before his eyes. "First time flying?" The elderly man beside him asked, apparently having woken from his nap. "No," Jamal replied quietly. "Just first time being reminded so clearly of my place." The man seemed confused by this response, but simply nodded and closed his eyes again. Jamal returned to examining his laptop, trying to determine if data recovery would be necessary if the device failed completely. His entire future felt suddenly precarious, hanging by a thread as thin and fragile as the cracked LCD display. The plane paused on the tarmac, apparently waiting for clearance. Minutes stretched into a half hour as Jamal sat immobile, trapped with his thoughts and humiliation. No flight attendant returned to take his information about the laptop. No one offered assistance or sympathy. He was effectively invisible, now relegated to the background of everyone else's journey. This invisibility, the ability of others to simply erase his presence, his rights, his humanity, with such casual ease was perhaps the most painful aspect of the entire ordeal. Not the loss of the comfortable seat, not even the damaged laptop, but the stark reminder that in the eyes of too many people, he simply didn't matter. The vibration of his phone pulled Jamal from his dark thoughts. The screen displayed Sarah Parker, his father's executive assistant. Jamal hesitated before answering. His relationship with his father was complicated enough without bringing Elijah into this humiliating situation. "Hello," he answered quietly, trying not to disturb the passengers around him. "Jamal, there's been a change of plans." Sarah's efficient voice came through clearly. "Your father's meeting in Tokyo was rescheduled. He decided to fly directly to San Francisco instead to attend your presentation." Jamal straightened in his seat. "Wait, what? Dad's coming to the conference?" "Actually, he's already landed at SFO. His jet touched down 20 minutes ago." The information hit Jamal like a physical force. After months of planning this trip as his own independent venture, after specifically declining his father's offer of transportation, now Elijah was suddenly in the picture. The timing couldn't have been worse. Sitting in a cramped economy seat with a broken laptop after being publicly humiliated. "Does he know I'm still in Chicago?" Jamal asked, his voice tight. "That's why I'm calling." "When he couldn't reach you directly, he asked me to check your flight status. You're showing a significant delay. He wants to know if you'd prefer to transfer to his jet for the return flight to San Francisco. He's having the pilot file a flight plan to O'Hare right now." The irony wasn't lost on Jamal. If he'd accepted his father's original offer, he would have avoided this entire degrading experience. No Marcus, no Brent, no broken laptop, no humiliation. Just the comfortable isolation of private aviation, where his right to occupy space would never be questioned. Jamal began, then trailed off, unsure how to respond. The memories flooded back. His 11th birthday, when Elijah had promised to attend his school science fair but sent an assistant with an expensive telescope instead. His middle school graduation, where Elijah had arrived for the last 5 minutes and left before Jamal could introduce him to his teachers. The countless father-son moments that had been sacrificed on the altar of Washington Innovation's growth. Would his father's presence now be any different, or would it simply be another brief appearance before business called him away again? "The captain has turned on the fastened seatbelt sign," came the announcement overhead. "We're experiencing some mechanical difficulties and will be returning to the gate. Please remain seated until further instructions." A collective groan rose from the passengers around him. "Jamal? Are you still there?" Sarah's voice brought him back to the phone call. "Yeah, sorry. Listen, we're having some plane issues. We're heading back to the gate. I'll call Dad directly once we're there." After ending the call, Jamal sat in silence as the plane slowly taxied back to the terminal. The universe seemed to be offering him an escape route, a way to avoid further confrontation with Marcus and Brent, a solution to his transportation problem, and possibly even a chance to repair his laptop before the presentation. Yet something held him back. Pride, stubbornness, or perhaps the painful awareness that once again he would be rescued by his father's resources rather than standing on his own merits. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom. "We apologize for the delay. Our maintenance team needs to address a mechanical issue. This will take approximately 2 hours. You're welcome to deplane and wait in the terminal, but please stay near the gate area for updates." As passengers began gathering their belongings, Jamal remained seated, scrolling through his phone. The notification light blinked a new text message from his friend Devon. "Dude, are you on AA1287? Someone just posted this on Twitter." Attached was a video clip. Jamal's stomach dropped as he clicked play. There he was standing in first class, being confronted by Marcus and Brent. The video had been shot from several rows back, partially capturing the interaction, including Marcus's not-so-subtle bump that had sent Jamal's laptop crashing to the floor. The caption read, "Entitled Bros Bully Kid out of first class seat. Flight attendant does nothing. Number flying while black. Number American Airlines." The video had already garnered hundreds of retweets and comments, most expressing outrage at both the bodybuilders and the airline's handling of the situation. Jamal's humiliation was now public spreading across social media platforms with each passing minute. Another notification popped up this time, a direct message from a news outlet asking for comment. "This can't be happening," Jamal muttered to himself. The elderly man beside him, now fully awake, peered at Jamal's phone. "Is that you?" In the video, Jamal nodded silently. "Those men had no right to treat you that way," the man said firmly. "And that flight attendant should be ashamed of herself." The woman on Jamal's other side was watching too. "You should sue the airline." She suggested her romance novel Forgotten. That's textbook discrimination. As the plane docked at the gate and passengers began to stand, Jamal made his decision. He would meet his father. Not as a child seeking rescue, but as a young man ready to have an honest conversation about what had just happened, about what happened every day to people who looked like him, regardless of their economic status or achievements. He texted his father, "Plane had mechanical issues. I'll meet you at the Admiral's Club in Terminal 3. Before leaving the aircraft, Jamal paused near the front cabin. Marcus and Brent were still seated in first class, laughing about something on Brent's phone. They didn't notice him watching, didn't recognize that their actions had consequences extending far beyond a simple seat assignment. Jamal took a deep breath and continued toward the exit. As he stepped into the jetway, his phone rang again, his father's direct line this time. "So what do you think Jamal should do?" Comment number 1 if you think he should confront the bodybuilders with his father present. Comment number 2 if you believe he should focus on getting to the conference and his presentation instead. Comment number 3 if you think he should pursue legal action against the airline. While we think about that question, please hit the like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories. Should Jamal expose the bodybuilders in the airline, or take the high road and focus on his future? What would you do in his situation? Let's see what happens next. The Admiral's Club lounge stood in stark contrast to the chaotic terminal outside. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, and the hushed conversations of business travelers created an atmosphere of privilege and exclusivity. Jamal showed his phone screen to the receptionist, who examined the digital pass his father had sent minutes earlier. "Mr. Washington, welcome," she said with practiced warmth. "Your father is waiting for you in the private conference room." Following her directions, Jamal navigated through the lounge, aware of the curious glances from other travelers. His casual attire, jeans, sneakers, and his Washington Innovations hoodie stood out among the business suits and designer luggage. The conference room door was partially open. Jamal paused, taking a moment to compose himself before entering. Through the gap, he could see his father standing by the window phone, pressed to his ear, silhouetted against the airport tarmac where planes taxied in the distance. Elijah Washington cut an impressive figure at 52, 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and the same deep brown skin and sharp features as his son. He projected authority with every gesture. His custom-tailored suit likely cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his signature titanium watch, a prototype from a Swiss manufacturer seeking investment, glinted under the recessed lighting. "I don't care about the regulatory hurdles," Elijah was saying, his deep voice carrying that unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to having his directives followed. "If Singapore wants our partnership, they'll expedite the approvals. That's non-negotiable." Jamal knocked lightly on the doorframe. His father turned, his stern expression immediately softening upon seeing his son. "I'll call you back," Elijah said into the phone, ending the call without waiting for a response. "Jamal, come in." They stood for an awkward moment before Elijah stepped forward, placing a hand on Jamal's shoulder, his version of an embrace. The physical resemblance between them was striking, though Jamal was still growing into the commanding presence that his father had perfected over decades of business negotiations. "The jet's fueled and ready," Elijah said by way of greeting. "We can be in San Francisco in under 4 hours. No, how are you? No, I've missed you." Just immediate focus on logistics and solutions, the Elijah Washington approach to life. "Thanks for coming, Dad," Jamal said, setting his backpack down on the polished conference table. "I wasn't expecting to see you until after the conference." "Plans change," Elijah replied with a dismissive wave. The Tokyo meeting can wait. Your presentation is important. Important enough to attend, but not important enough to mention, until now Jamal thought, but didn't say. Instead, he unzipped his backpack and carefully removed his damaged laptop. "We have a problem," he said, opening the device to reveal the cracked screen. Elijah frowned. "What happened?" "It got knocked to the floor on the plane." "Careless," his father commented, examining the damage. "We'll get you a replacement before the presentation. I'll have Sarah arrange it." Jamal closed the laptop. "It wasn't carelessness, Dad. It was deliberately knocked down." Elijah's attention, previously divided between Jamal and the emails on his own phone, suddenly focused entirely on his son. "Explain." Jamal hesitated. Growing up, he'd rarely brought his problems to his father. Elijah's responses typically fell into two categories: swift, overwhelming intervention that left Jamal feeling helpless, or dismissive advice to toughen up that left him feeling inadequate. Neither approach had fostered the kind of father-son relationship where vulnerability felt safe. "It's not important," Jamal said, backtracking. "What matters is fixing it before tomorrow." Elijah studied his son's face with the same intensity he applied to financial reports and acquisition targets. "Something happened on that plane," he stated. "I want to know why so you can throw money at it. Send in the corporate lawyers." The words came out sharper than Jamal had intended. Elijah's expression didn't change, but his posture stiffened slightly. "Is that what you think of me? That my only response to any situation is financial, isn't it?" Jamal challenged. "When was the last time we dealt with something as father and son, not CEO and heir apparent?" The question hung between them, exposing the fault lines in their relationship that had widened with each passing year. Elijah moved to the minibar in the corner of the conference room, pouring himself a glass of water. He offered one to Jamal, who declined with a shake of his head. "Tell me what happened on the plane," Elijah said again, his tone softer. "Please." The unexpected please caught Jamal off guard. He sank into one of the leather chairs and began recounting the incident: the initial confrontation, the flight attendants, failure to intervene appropriately, the racist undertones, and finally, the humiliating relocation to economy class. Elijah listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly grave. When Jamal mentioned Marcus deliberately bumping into him, causing the laptop to fall, a muscle twitched in Elijah's jaw, the only visible sign of his rising anger. "And the airline did nothing?" Elijah asked. When Jamal finished, "They promised to file a report after takeoff, but we never got that far because of the mechanical issues." Elijah set his glass down with precision. "Names. What the names of these bodybuilders? The flight attendant. I want names." Here it came, the overwhelming corporate response Jamal had expected. "Dad, this isn't about suing them or getting revenge. This is about accountability," Elijah countered. "No one treats my son that way." "But they do." Jamal burst out years of frustration, suddenly breaking through his careful composure. "They do treat me that way all the time, every day. When you're not around with your billions and your influence and your name recognition. When I'm just another black kid trying to exist in spaces that weren't designed for people who look like us." Elijah fell silent. Something rare for a man whose words could move markets. He looked at his son. Really looked at him, perhaps, for the first time in years. "This happens often?" he finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet, "Often enough that I have protocols for it." Jamal replied, "Ways to de-escalate, ways to protect myself, ways to swallow my pride when necessary." "You shouldn't have to do that." "No, I shouldn't. But that's the reality." Elijah turned away, facing the window again. His reflection showed an expression Jamal had rarely seen: uncertainty. The great Elijah Washington, momentarily at a loss. "When I started Washington Innovations, he began slowly. I faced discrimination constantly. Venture capitalists who wouldn't take meetings with me. Potential clients who would speak to my white employees, but not to me. Security guards following me through my own building until I had my ID badge redesigned with CEO in bold letters." Jamal listened surprised. His father rarely spoke about the early days of his company, and never about the obstacles he had faced as a black entrepreneur in a predominantly white industry. I thought Elijah continued, I genuinely believed that by accumulating enough wealth, enough power, I could insulate you from that experience, that my success would create a shield around you. Money doesn't make racism disappear, Dad. It just changes how it's expressed. Elijah turned back his eyes, meeting Jamal's. No, it doesn't. But it does change what we can do about it. And what exactly is that? Buy the airline. Have those guys fired. That doesn't solve the underlying problem. Maybe not, Elijah conceded, but it creates consequences for their actions. Consequences create awareness. Awareness drives change. Jamal shook his head. That's a top-down approach. Real change happens from the ground up through education and community engagement. That's what my app is designed to facilitate. For the first time in their conversation, a hint of pride flickered across Elijah's face. Tell me more about this app of yours. The real version, not the sanitized presentation you've been practicing. Surprised by the request, Jamal opened his damaged laptop and navigated to his project files. For the next 20 minutes, he explained the vision behind Bridge Connect, how it created pathways between underserved communities and educational resources, how it facilitated mentorship connections, how it tracked outcomes and adapted to user needs. Elijah listened attentively, occasionally asking incisive questions that revealed he'd done more research into Jamal's project than he'd let on. As Jamal described the pilot program he had implemented in South Chicago, Elijah's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it without answering, a small gesture that spoke volumes. You've built something meaningful, Elijah said when Jamal finished. Something with real potential for impact. That's the goal. It's a good goal. Elijah paused, choosing his next words carefully. I've made many mistakes as your father, Jamal. Prioritizing business over family, missing important moments, trying to solve problems with money rather than presence. The admission caught Jamal off guard. His father had never been one for emotional conversations or apologies. I can't change the past, Elijah continued, but I can be here now. So what do you want to do about what happened on that plane? The question hung between them, an offer not just of assistance, but of partnership. For the first time, Elijah wasn't dictating a solution, but asking Jamal what he wanted. I don't want revenge, Jamal said after a moment's reflection. But I don't want to let it go either. Those men need to understand the impact of their behavior. The airline needs to address its failure to protect passengers from discrimination. Elijah nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable. And the conference presentation. Jamal glanced at his damaged laptop. The presentation goes forward. My work is too important to be derailed by this incident. Good. Elijah reached for his phone. I'm going to make a few calls about getting your laptop repaired or replaced immediately. In the meantime, he hesitated, then asked, Would you be willing to return to the plane with me to address this situation directly? Jamal considered the proposal. Going back meant facing Marcus and Brent again, this time with his father beside him. It meant potential confrontation, public attention, possible escalation. But it also meant standing up not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever been forced to surrender their dignity in the face of discrimination. Yes, Jamal decided, let's go back. Let's go. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the Admiral's Club, Elijah placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder again. This time, the gesture felt less like an obligation and more like genuine connection. I'm proud of you, son, Elijah said quietly. Not because of your app or your presentation or your scholarship, but because of who you are, the man you're becoming. The words landed like raindrops in a desert. Unexpected, precious, life-giving. Jamal nodded, unable to formulate a response through the sudden tightness in his throat. Together, father and son walked out of the lounge and back toward the gate, their strides unconsciously synchronizing as they moved forward with shared purpose. What exactly are you planning to do? Jamal asked as they approached Gate C-22, where passengers from the delayed flight were still waiting. The departure board now showed an estimated 3-hour delay. Elijah adjusted his titanium watch, a habit Jamal recognized as his father's preparation for important negotiations. First, we gather information. Then we determine the most effective response. Before Jamal could ask for clarification, Elijah approached the gate agent, who immediately straightened her posture upon recognizing him. "Mr. Washington, what an unexpected honor," she said, her voice carrying enough to turn heads throughout the waiting area. "I need to speak with the flight manager for a 1287. Elijah stated, his tone pleasant but firm. "Of course, sir. Right away." As the gate agent made a call, Jamal noticed several passengers recording the interaction on their phones. News of Elijah Washington's presence was spreading through the gate area like wildfire. A few people were openly pointing at Jamal, now making the connection between the viral video and the sudden appearance of the tech billionaire. Within minutes, a harried-looking man in an American Airlines management uniform approached them. "Mr. Washington, I'm Keith Brennan, the on-duty flight manager. How can I assist you today?" "My son experienced an incident on your aircraft," Elijah explained, gesturing toward Jamal. "I'd like to review the security footage." Keith's expression shifted from deferential to cautious. Security footage is typically only released through formal channels with appropriate "I understand" protocol. Elijah interrupted smoothly. "However, given that footage of the incident is already circulating on social media, expediting this process serves both our interests." As if on cue, Elijah's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. "Excuse me, I should take this." Jamal explained the situation to Mr. Brennan. Stepping aside, Elijah engaged in an intense conversation while Jamal recounted the confrontation to the increasingly uncomfortable flight manager. "I'm very sorry for your experience," Keith said when Jamal finished. "We take these matters seriously at American Airlines. Seriously enough to allow your flight attendant to accommodate discriminatory behavior," Jamal challenged. Before Keith could respond, Elijah rejoined them, his expression unreadable. "That was Sarah. Apparently those bodybuilders, Marcus Reed and Brent Thompson, are sponsored by Fit Life Nutrition." "Okay," Jamal replied, not seeing the significance. Fit Life Nutrition is a subsidiary of Nutric, which was acquired last year by Washington Health Innovations. The implication dawned on Jamal. "You own their sponsor?" "Technically, yes, which gives us multiple avenues for addressing this situation." Elijah turned to Keith. "I'd like to return to the aircraft. My son will be resuming his original seat assignment." Keith hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll arrange it immediately." As the flight manager hurried away, Elijah guided Jamal to a quieter corner of the gate area. "Before we proceed, I want to be clear about something. This is your situation. I'm here to support your decisions, not to override them." Jamal studied his father skeptically. "That's not your usual approach." "I'm trying something new," Elijah admitted with the ghost of a smile. "So what would you like to achieve here?" The question caught Jamal off guard. Throughout his life, his father had been the one with objectives and strategies, while Jamal had mostly reacted to Elijah's decisions. Now being asked to define the goal felt both empowering and slightly overwhelming. "I want them to understand the impact of their behavior," Jamal said after a moment's thought. "Not just to be punished, but to actually learn something." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "And the airline, they need better training. Their staff should know how to handle discrimination instead of enabling it." Specific measurable outcomes, Elijah noted with approval. "We can work with that." Keith returned, accompanied by a woman in a more senior airline uniform. "Mr. Washington, this is Patricia Coleman, our Customer Experience Director for O'Hare. She'll be personally overseeing this matter." Patricia extended her hand to both Washingtons. "We've reviewed the initial reports and would like to offer our sincere apologies for your experience, Mr. Washington," she said, addressing Jamal directly. "We're prepared to fully investigate this incident and take appropriate action." "The security footage," Elijah prompted. "Being pulled now," Patricia confirmed. "We can view it in our operations office." And the flight attendant who handled the situation. "Heather, I believe," Jamal asked. "We've asked her to meet us as well." As they followed Patricia toward the operations area, Jamal's phone buzzed with another text from Devon. "Dude, your trending number justice for Jamal is taking off." "And is that your dad with you?" In these new videos attached was a clip of Jamal and Elijah speaking with the airline representatives, already gathering thousands of views. The power of social media was amplifying what had begun as a personal humiliation into something much larger, a public conversation about privilege, race, and corporate responsibility. In the airline's operations office, they viewed the security footage from inside the aircraft. The high-definition video captured the entire confrontation from multiple angles, including Marcus deliberately bumping Jamal and the subsequent damage to the laptop. The evidence is clear. Patricia stated, "This was unacceptable behavior and the situation was mishandled by our staff." Elijah watched the footage with a controlled expression, but Jamal could sense his father's tightly leashed anger. When the video showed Heather asking Jamal to move despite his valid ticket, Elijah's jaw tightened visibly. "I'd like to speak with Marcus Reed and Brent Thompson," Elijah said when the playback finished. Patricia nodded. "They're still on board the aircraft awaiting information about the delay. We can arrange that, and I want a meeting with your diversity training team," Jamal added. "I have some suggestions based on my work with Bridge Connect." Patricia looked momentarily surprised, but quickly recovered. "Of course, we're always looking to improve our training protocols." As they prepared to return to the aircraft, Elijah pulled Jamal aside. "I need to make one more call. This situation presents an opportunity beyond just addressing what happened to you. What kind of opportunity? A chance to create systemic change rather than just individual consequences." Elijah scrolled through his contacts. "How would you feel about expanding Bridge Connect to include corporate diversity training modules?" Jamal blinked in surprise. "That's actually something I've been considering, but I didn't have the resources or connections to implement it." "Well, you do now." Elijah smiled slightly. "If you're interested." For the first time that day, Jamal felt a genuine sense of possibility emerging from the unpleasant incident. "I'm definitely interested." "Good. Let's handle this immediate situation first. Then we'll discuss expansion plans on the flight to San Francisco." As they walked back toward the gate, Elijah made his call, not to lawyers or PR specialists, says Jamal might have expected, but to Dr. Angela Rivera, Washington Innovation's Chief Diversity Officer. "Angela, I need your input on something developing in real time," Elijah said, briefly explaining the situation. "Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Can you join a video call in about 20 minutes? "Perfect." By the time they reached the jet bridge, word had spread throughout the terminal. Passengers and airline staff alike watched with undisguised interest as Jamal and Elijah Washington prepared to board the aircraft together. "Remember," Elijah said quietly as they approached the plane's entrance, "this is your situation to address. I'm here as support, not to take over." Jamal nodded, feeling a new sense of confidence as he stepped through the aircraft door with his father beside him. The dynamic had shifted, not just between him and the bodybuilders who had humiliated him, but between him and Elijah as well. For perhaps the first time they were truly operating as partners, rather than as parent and child. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin was tense with anticipation as they boarded. Marcus and Brent were still seated in the first row, now looking considerably less comfortable, as whispers spread through the cabin about exactly who had just entered the aircraft. "Mr. Reed, Mr. Thompson," Patricia called out. "These gentlemen would like a word with you." The first-class cabin fell silent as Jamal and Elijah stood in the aisle. Marcus Reed's cocky demeanor visibly faltered when he recognized Elijah Washington. Beside him, Brent Thompson straightened in his seat, an anxious expression crossing his face. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice lacking the confidence he'd displayed earlier. "I believe you've already met my son," Elijah stated calmly. Though your previous interaction left much to be desired, a murmur rippled through the cabin as passengers connected the dots. Several were openly recording the confrontation on their phones, ensuring this moment would join the earlier video in its viral journey across social media platforms. The aircraft's captain appeared from the cockpit, immediately assessing the situation. "Mr. Washington," he acknowledged with a respectful nod, "I understand there was an incident on my aircraft before departure. There was Elijah confirmed, and we're here to address it directly." Perhaps we should move this discussion to the jetway, the captain suggested, eyeing the growing audience of recording passengers. No, Jamal interjected, surprising himself with his own assertiveness. This happened publicly. The resolution should be public too. Elijah gave his son an approving glance before turning back to Marcus and Brent. Gentlemen, I've reviewed the security footage. I've seen exactly what transpired. Brent shifted uncomfortably. Look, there might have been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Jamal repeated incredulously. You called me, and I quote someone who doesn't belong in first class. You watched your friend deliberately damage my property. Then you laughed about it. Which part was a misunderstanding, Marcus's face flushed with anger or embarrassment? Possibly both. You don't get to talk to me like that, kid. Actually, Elijah interjected smoothly, he does. Just as you had the right to speak freely earlier, my son has the right to address your behavior directly. That's how discourse works in a civil society. The flight attendant who had mishandled the original situation. Heather emerged from the galley area, her face pale as she recognized Jamal. Patricia gestured for her to join the group. Miss Brooks, Patricia said formally, I believe you owe Mr. Washington an apology. Heather looked between Jamal and Elijah, clearly connecting their relationship for the first time. I was just trying to resolve a difficult situation quickly. By asking the passenger with a valid ticket to surrender his seat to accommodate someone making racist remarks, Elijah questioned his tone deceptively mild. I didn't hear any racist. The security footage includes audio. Patricia interrupted firmly. Let's not compound the problem with denials. A tense silence fell over the cabin. Several passengers who had witnessed the original confrontation looked ashamed of their inaction. Others appeared fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. This real-life morality play exposing the often hidden dynamics of privilege and discrimination. Jamal took a deep breath. This was his moment not to exact revenge or humiliate those who had humiliated him, but to transform an ugly incident into something meaningful. I'm not interested in getting anyone fired. He began addressing not just Marcus and Brent, but the entire cabin. What I am interested in is acknowledgement and education. He turned to Heather first. When you asked me to move despite my valid ticket, you signaled that my right to occupy space was less important than keeping other passengers comfortable, even when those passengers were behaving inappropriately. Heather's professional mask cracked slightly. That wasn't my intention. Impact matters more than intention, Jamal replied. Especially when the impact reinforces patterns of discrimination, he shifted his attention to Marcus and Brent. And you two assumed I didn't belong in first class based entirely on how I look. You used your physical presence to intimidate me. You damaged my property. All because you couldn't imagine that I had earned my place here just as legitimately as you had. Marcus started to respond, but Brent placed a restraining hand on his friend's arm. He's right, Brent admitted quietly. We were out of line. Way out of line, added a businessman from across the aisle, the same one who had briefly spoken up during the original confrontation, and the rest of us should have done more to stop it. A murmur of agreement spread through the cabin. The atmosphere was shifting, moving from tension towards something more constructive. What happens now? Marcus asked, glancing nervously at Elijah. That depends, Elijah replied, looking to his son. Jamal considered the situation carefully. He could demand their removal from the flight, potentially costing them their professional appearances at whatever event awaited them in San Francisco. He could insist on formal charges for the damaged laptop. He could leverage his father's ownership of their sponsor to impact their careers directly. But none of those options aligned with the person Jamal aspired to be. Fit Life Nutrition sponsors you both, correct? He asked. Marcus and Brent nodded cautiously. Fit Life is a Washington innovations company, Jamal explained. My father could end your sponsorship with a single phone call. The color drained from both bodybuilders' faces. But that's not what I want. Jamal continued. Instead, I'm proposing something different. Fit Life is launching a new community fitness initiative in underserved neighborhoods. I think you both could contribute meaningfully to that program. Confusion replaced fear on their faces. You want us to teach fitness classes? Brent asked hesitantly. I want you to use your platform to make a positive difference, Jamal clarified. To experience communities you might not otherwise encounter, to challenge your own assumptions about who belongs where. Elijah watched his son with undisguised pride. As Jamal outlined his proposal, 6 months of community engagement work with FitLife's outreach program, participation in Washington Innovation's diversity training, and a public statement acknowledging their behavior and committing to growth. And if we refuse, Marcus challenged, though, with notably less bravado than before. Then, this incident captured from multiple angles and currently trending on social media becomes your professional legacy, Elijah stated matter-of-factly. Your choice. Brent didn't hesitate. I'm in. Actually, I want to do this. What happened earlier, it wasn't right. Marcus looked at his friend in surprise before reluctantly nodding. Fine, I'll do the program. Jamal turned to Patricia and Heather next. As for American Airlines, I'd like to work with your training department to develop more effective protocols for addressing discrimination on flights. My app, Bridge Connect, includes educational modules that could be adapted for staff training. Patricia nodded enthusiastically. We would welcome that collaboration, Mr. Washington. Heather, still visibly uncomfortable, finally offered a genuine apology. I'm sorry, Mr. Washington. I should have handled the situation differently. I'd appreciate the opportunity to learn from this mistake. Apology accepted, Jamal replied simply. The captain, who had been monitoring the interaction closely, stepped forward. Now that we've addressed this situation, I need to update everyone on our flight status. The mechanical issue has been resolved and we'll be departing in approximately 30 minutes. All passengers should return to their assigned seats. He turns specifically to Jamal. Mr. Washington, your original seat in 2A is available for you. As the group dispersed, Jamal reclaimed his rightful place in first class. Elijah took the seat beside him, purchased quickly through the airline's app moments earlier. Marcus and Brent moved several rows back, subdued and thoughtful. A woman across the aisle leaned toward Jamal. That was impressive, she said quietly. Most people would have gone for revenge, not education. Revenge might feel satisfying momentarily, Jamal replied, but it doesn't create lasting change. As the plane prepared for takeoff, passengers from throughout the cabin stopped by to introduce themselves to Jamal and Elijah. Some offered apologies for not speaking up earlier. Others expressed admiration for how Jamal had handled the confrontation. A tech industry executive handed Jamal his business card, mentioning interest in BridgeCon's applications for corporate environments. What had begun as a humiliating experience was transforming into something entirely different, a catalyst for conversation, connection, and potentially significant professional opportunities. You navigated that beautifully, Elijah commented once they were airborne. Genuine admiration in his voice. I would have been far less merciful at your age. I learned from watching you, Jamal admitted. Not from how you handled conflicts, but from how you built solutions. You've always been better at creating than destroying. The observation seemed to touch something deep in Elijah. He glanced out the window at the clouds below, his expression reflective. I wish I'd applied that philosophy to family as well as business. It's not too late, Jamal offered quietly. For the remainder of the flight, father and son spoke more openly than they had in years about Jamal's vision for Bridge Connect, about Elijah's early struggles in the tech industry, about their shared hopes for creating meaningful change in spaces where discrimination persisted. By the time the plane began its descent into San Francisco, the contours of a new partnership had begun to take shape, not just between father and son, but between their complementary approaches to addressing inequality. Elijah's resources and connections, combined with Jamal's innovative technology and fresh perspective, created possibilities neither could have achieved alone. As they prepared to disembark, Brent Thompson approached their seats while Marcus waited by the exit. Mr. Washington, Jamal. Brent began hesitantly. I wanted to say something else. What happened earlier? That wasn't really about you. It felt pretty personal, Jamal replied evenly. That's just it. It wasn't. It was about me. Brent looked genuinely troubled. I grew up poor in rural Kentucky, worked construction jobs to pay for community college before getting into fitness. Guys like your dad, guys with real money and education, they terrify me, make me feel inadequate. So you target people who look like me, but seem vulnerable? Jamal asked. Brent winced. It sounds awful when you put it like that, but yeah, I guess that's exactly what I did. Projected my insecurities onto you because you seemed like an easier target than actually dealing with my own issues. The confession was unexpected but oddly illuminating. So much discrimination stemmed not just from hatred, but from fear and insecurity from the desperate need to feel superior when life made you feel anything but the community program. Jamal said, "Take it seriously. You might find you get more from it than you give." Brent nodded. "I will. I promise." As the bodybuilder walked away, Elijah turned to his son with newfound respect. "You understand people in ways I never did at your age. Maybe never have." "I've had different experiences," Jamal replied simply. They exited the plane together, stepping not just into San Francisco International Airport, but into a new chapter of their relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than obligation, on partnership rather than authority. The humiliation that had started the day had been transformed through Jamal's wisdom, and Elijah's support into something neither of them could have anticipated, a foundation for healing growth and meaningful change. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation as tech industry leaders, investors, and media representatives filled the auditorium. The Tech Forward event had grown into one of the most influential gatherings in Silicon Valley, where groundbreaking innovations were unveiled and careers were made or broken in 20-minute presentation slots. Backstage, Jamal reviewed his slides one final time on the brand new laptop his father had procured. A significant upgrade from his damaged device with enhanced processing power and graphics capabilities that made his Bridge Connect demonstration even more impressive. 5 minutes until you're up, the event coordinator informed him, clipboard in hand. The audience is larger than expected. Your father's presence generated additional interest. Jamal nodded, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. When he'd originally prepared for this presentation, he'd focused exclusively on Bridge Connect's technical aspects and educational applications. Now, after the events of the previous day, he had made significant modifications to his approach. Elijah appeared beside him, having just concluded a series of impromptu meetings with industry contacts in the venue's VIP lounge. "How are you feeling?" nervous Jamal admitted. "But ready. Remember, they're not just evaluating your app," Elijah advised. "They're evaluating your vision. Show them not just what Bridge Connect is, but what it could become." The coordinators signaled that it was time. Jamal straightened his shoulders and walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily disorienting before his eyes adjusted to see the packed auditorium before him. "Good afternoon." He began, his voice steady, despite the butterflies in his stomach. "My name is Jamal Washington, and I'm here to talk about connections, specifically the connections we fail to make in a world increasingly divided by privilege, access, and opportunity." Rather than launching directly into his technical demonstration as originally planned, Jamal shared the story of what had transpired on the plane not as a complaint or accusation, but as a real-world illustration of the gaps Bridge Connect was designed to address. "Yesterday, I experienced firsthand how quickly assumptions can lead to exclusion." He explained, his words projected across the massive screen behind him. "But more importantly, I witnessed how education and accountability can transform a negative interaction into an opportunity for growth." The audience was rapt, many leaning forward in their seats, as Jamal outlined how the confrontation had evolved from discrimination to dialogue. When he described the educational program, the bodybuilders had agreed to join. Spontaneous applause broke out across the auditorium. This is why Bridge Connect exists. Jamal continued, transitioning to his technical presentation, not just to connect underprivileged communities with educational resources, but to facilitate the conversations and experiences that challenge our assumptions about who belongs where. For the next 15 minutes, He demonstrated the app's capabilities. The algorithm that matched mentors with students based on needs and expertise, the resource allocation system that directed educational materials to communities with limited access, and the outcomes tracking that measured real-world impact. But today, Jamal announced approaching the conclusion of his allotted time. I'm announcing an expansion of Bridge Connect's mission. With support from Washington Innovations, we're developing corporate training modules designed to address unconscious bias and discrimination in workplace environments. This announcement generated a buzz throughout the audience. Several attendees began typing rapidly on their devices, likely sharing the news across social media and industry networks. Because bridges aren't just needed in underserved communities, Jamal emphasized. They're needed in boardrooms, in first-class cabins, in every space where assumptions about belonging create barriers to human potential. As Jamal concluded his presentation to enthusiastic applause, he spotted his father in the wings, nodding in approval. But more surprisingly, he noticed Brent Thompson standing at the back of the auditorium, listening attentively without Marcus beside him. The Q&A session that followed was lively, with industry leaders asking insightful questions about implementation scalability and metrics for success. A representative from a major airline, not American, but one of its competitors, expressed particular interest in adapting Bridge Connect's training modules for their own staff development. When the session concluded, Jamal was immediately surrounded by attendees eager to exchange contact information and discuss potential partnerships. The momentum was palpable. What had begun as his passion project was rapidly evolving into something with far greater reach and impact than he had initially imagined. Elijah watched from a distance, allowing his son to navigate the professional interactions independently while remaining available for support if needed. The pride evident in his expression went beyond paternal satisfaction. There was genuine respect for Jamal as a colleague and innovator. Later, as the crowd dispersed for the conference's networking reception, Brent approached Jamal hesitantly. That was eye-opening. The bodybuilder admitted, looking surprisingly vulnerable without his intimidating friend beside him. "I didn't expect to actually learn something today." "Where's Marcus?" Jamal asked, curious about the separation. "We had a disagreement after the flight," Brent explained. "He thought the whole community service thing was just something to say to avoid trouble. I told him I was taking it seriously." He shrugged his massive shoulders. "We are taking a break from traveling together." "That couldn't have been easy," Jamal observed. "Neither was standing up to him on the plane when I should have." Brent replied, his voice tinged with regret. "But I'm trying to do better now." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Angela Rivera, Washington Innovations Chief Diversity Officer, who had flown in specifically to meet with Jamal about the corporate training expansion. "Your presentation was excellent," she told him warmly, "and the timing is perfect. We've been looking to develop exactly this kind of program for our corporate partners." As they discussed implementation details, media representatives circled, capturing photos and snippets of conversation. The story was irresistible. A young black developer whose experience with discrimination had catalyzed a major corporate initiative backed by one of tech's most influential figures. What no one in the bustling conference center could have predicted was how this single interaction would ripple outward in the coming months. The viral video of the original confrontation, followed by footage of the resolution and now coverage of Jamal's innovative response, was creating a narrative arc that resonated far beyond the immediate participants. By evening, major tech publications had picked up the story. By the following morning, mainstream news outlets were covering it as well. What might have been just another instance of discrimination, painful but ultimately forgotten in the rapid cycle of outrage and distraction, was instead becoming a case study in constructive response and meaningful action. For Jamal, the transformation extended beyond professional opportunities. The experience had changed how he viewed his relationship with his father, his approach to adversity, and his understanding of his own power to affect change. As he stood at the conference reception, watching Elijah engage with industry peers who were now looking at both Washingtons with new appreciation, Jamal realized that the humiliation he had experienced was no longer the defining feature of this journey. Instead, It had become merely the opening chapter in a much larger story about connection education and transformation, the very values at the heart of Bridge Connect itself. The next day, American Airlines announced a comprehensive review of its training procedures for flight staff with specific attention to handling discrimination incidents. The statement mentioned a partnership with an educational technology developer to enhance staff preparation, not naming Bridge Connect directly, but the implication was clear to anyone following the story. FitLife Nutrition released its own statement outlining a new community fitness program targeting underserved neighbourhoods, with Brent Thompson prominently featured as a program leader. The announcement included a candid acknowledgement from Brent about his own learning journey and commitment to growth. Marcus Reed was notably absent from the initiative. Those social media sleuths quickly discovered he had quietly enrolled in a diversity awareness program at his local community college. Whether motivated by genuine reflection or career preservation remained unclear, but the action itself represented movement in a positive direction. For Jamal, watching these developments unfold while fielding an overwhelming number of partnership inquiries and media requests, the most significant transformation was internal. The teenager who had hesitated to stand his ground on the airplane was evolving into a young man confident in his voice, his vision, and his ability to navigate challenging situations without compromising his integrity. And beside him, providing support without overshadowing his son's emerging leadership, Elijah Washington was undergoing his own transformation, from distant provider to engaged father, from solo success story to collaborative partner in creating meaningful change. The bridge they were building between their two worlds. Jamal's innovative idealism and Elijah's practical experience was becoming a model for the very connections Bridge Connect sought to facilitate on a larger scale. What had begun in humiliation was blossoming into something neither of them could have anticipated. A powerful partnership with the potential to transform not just their relationship, but countless other lives touched by their combined vision and resources. 3 months after the incident, Jamal stood before a group of 30 high school students in South Chicago's West Side Community Center. The teenagers, all from backgrounds similar to his own, listened attentively as he demonstrated Bridge Connect's newest features on the large screen behind him. This mentorship module connects you directly with professionals in your fields of interest, he explained, navigating through the app's sleek interface. Whether you're interested in technology, healthcare business, or creative industries, there are people ready to share their knowledge and experience with you. The classroom looked nothing like it had when Jamal first proposed using the space for his pilot program. New computers lined the walls, high-speed internet had been installed, and the once peeling paint had been replaced with vibrant colors and inspiring quotes from diverse leaders in various fields. Washington Innovation's investment in the community center had transformed not just the physical space, but the opportunities available to the students who gathered there. What had begun as Jamal's modest scholarship initiative had expanded into a comprehensive educational support system with nationwide reach. The most important thing to remember, Jamal continued making eye contact with each student, is that you belong in any space you earn your way into. Whether that's a prestigious university, a corporate boardroom, or yes, even a first-class cabin. A knowing smile passed among the students who had followed Jamal's story as it evolved from viral video to movement. Many wore t-shirts bearing the program's new slogan, "Building Bridges, Breaking Barriers." At the back of the classroom, Elijah Washington observed quietly, having arrived midway through the session after concluding a series of meetings with local business leaders interested in supporting the initiative. In the months since the airplane incident, he had restructured his schedule to spend 1 week each month in Chicago, working alongside Jamal to expand Bridge Connect's reach, while reconnecting with the community where his own journey had begun. The door opened, and a familiar figure entered. Brent Thompson, now a regular visitor to the community center, where he volunteered teaching fitness classes twice weekly. The transformation in the bodybuilder was remarkable. The aggressive posturing had given way to genuine engagement with the students, many of whom had initially been intimidated by his physical presence, but now greeted him with high fives and easy conversation. "Sorry I'm late," Brent said quietly to Elijah. The previous class ran long. No problem, Elijah replied. They're responding well to the program. Indeed, the fitness initiative Brent had helped develop had become one of the Cent's most popular offerings, combining physical training with discussions about health, nutrition, and mental wellness resources often lacking in underserved communities. Marcus Reed was no longer part of the picture. After making a public apology and completing his required community service hours, he had chosen to distance himself from both Brent and the program, uncomfortable with the ongoing visibility and accountability. His sponsor had not renewed his contract when it expired, though FitLife Nutrition had made good on its promise not to terminate the agreement prematurely if he fulfilled his obligations. As Jamal concluded his presentation, the students broke into small groups to explore the app's features with hands-on exercises he had designed. He moved through the classroom, offering guidance and encouragement, his ease as a mentor belying his own youth. Elijah approached his son during a quiet moment. The partnership with Chicago Public Schools is final, he informed Jamal. Starting next semester, Bridge Connect will be available to every student in the district. That's great news, Jamal replied. Genuine excitement in his voice. What about the corporate training modules? 23 companies signed on this quarter alone, Elijah reported, including American Airlines, whose training program is now being adopted by 3 other major carriers. The airline had indeed transformed its approach to handling discrimination incidents with Heather, the flight attendant, from the original confrontation, now serving as a peer trainer for the new protocols. Her first-hand experience with the failures of the previous system made her an effective advocate for change within the company. The educational impact has exceeded our projections, Elijah continued. But I'm most impressed by what's happening right here in this room. Jamal followed his father's gaze to where a student named DeAndre was explaining a technical feature to his classmates with growing confidence. 3 months ago, DeAndre had been on the verge of dropping out. Now he was emerging as a leader among his peers, his natural intelligence finding purpose through the opportunities Bridge Connect had helped create. It was never just about an app, Jamal observed. It was about creating the conditions for potential to flourish. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. You understood that before I did. I spent years throwing money at problems without addressing the underlying systems. We need both approaches, Jamal pointed out. Resources and vision have to work together. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a news crew from a national education channel there to document the program's success as part of a special on innovative approaches to educational equity. The producer had specifically requested interviews with both Washingtons, interested in how their personal experience had catalyzed a broader movement. As the students rearranged the classroom for the filming, Jamal's phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, Tech Forward Breakthrough Award nomination. Dad, he said, quietly showing Elijah the screen. Bridge Connect has been nominated for the Breakthrough Impact Award, the prestigious recognition given to technology. Innovations demonstrating exceptional social benefit could elevate the project's visibility even further, potentially attracting the partnerships and funding needed for truly nationwide implementation. Elijah squeezed his son's shoulder gently. Well, we earned it, Jamal corrected him. This became a different project when you got involved. The acknowledgement represented how far they had come since that day on the airplane, from the awkward distance of a fractured relationship to the strength of a genuine partnership. As the camera crew set up their equipment, Jamal reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The humiliation he had experienced in first class could have left lasting scars, reinforcing the message that certain spaces weren't meant for people like him, regardless of their achievements or credentials. Instead, through his own resilience and his father's support, that painful moment had been transformed into a catalyst for change, not just in their relationship, but in the lives of countless others touched by Bridge Connect's expanding reach. The students gathered around as the interview began, pride evident in their faces as Jamal articulated the vision that had brought them all together. These young people weren't just users of the app. They were its ambassadors and future developers, already contributing code improvements and suggesting new features based on their experiences. The most powerful outcome of this project, Jamal told the interviewer, has been watching how education creates ripple effects. When one person gains access to knowledge and opportunity, they naturally extend that access to others. And what would you say to the people involved in the original incident? The interviewer asked, referencing the confrontation that had now become part of Bridge Connect's origin story. Jamal considered the question carefully before answering. "I'd thank them," he said, finally, not for the discrimination itself that was wrong and harmful, but for becoming part of a learning journey that's benefited far more people than just those directly involved. Elijah, watching his son handle the interview with grace and wisdom beyond his years, felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected gift that had emerged from that difficult day. The incident had forced them both to confront patterns in their relationship and in the world around them, creating an opening for growth neither had anticipated. As the formal interview concluded, the students crowded around Jamal, eager to share their own experiences with the program and ideas for its future development. Their energy and enthusiasm were infectious, filling the room with possibility. Brent, who had been observing quietly from the sidelines, approached Elijah. "I never expected to be here," he admitted. "When I signed up for the community service, it was just to avoid trouble. But these kids, they've taught me more than I could ever teach them." "That's how real education works," Elijah replied. "It's always a two-way exchange." The bodybuilder nodded thoughtfully. "My sponsor wants to extend my contract specifically to continue this work. They're seeing the marketing benefits. The redemption narrative plays well with consumers, but honestly, I'd do it without the sponsorship at this point." This, too, was an unexpected outcome. The transformation of a reluctant participant into a genuine advocate for the program's mission. As the afternoon wound down and the students began to disperse, Jamal found himself standing beside his father at the classroom window watching as young people filed out into the Chicago streets with new purpose in their steps. "When I got on that plane," Jamal reflected, "I was trying to prove I could succeed without your help, without your name, without your resources. I was so focused on independence that I couldn't see the value of partnership. And I was so focused on providing material support that I missed the opportunity for real connection." Elijah acknowledged, "We both had something to learn." Outside, the winter sun cast long shadows across the community center's newly renovated playground, where several students had lingered to continue their conversations. The scene embodied what Bridge Connect had become: not just a technological tool, but a facilitator of human connection across barriers that too often divided communities. "So what's next?" Elijah asked, turning to his son with genuine curiosity. Jamal smiled. "We keep building bridges." The simplicity of the answer below: securing sustainable funding, navigating the inevitable resistance to change within established systems. But standing together, father and son, tech visionary and business leader, they possessed a powerful combination of idealism and experience, innovation, and infrastructure. What had begun in humiliation on an airplane had evolved into something neither could have created alone. A pathway forward not just for themselves, but for communities seeking connection across the divides of privilege, opportunity, and understanding. As they left the classroom together, walking side by side through the community center that now served as Bridge Connect's operational headquarters, their footsteps echoed with the promise of continuing impact. A promise born not from revenge or resentment, but from the transformative power of dignity reclaimed and purpose discovered. Jamal's journey teaches us powerful lessons about confronting discrimination. First, dignity matters more than revenge. When faced with racial prejudice, Jamal chose education over retaliation, transforming a painful experience into meaningful change. This approach created lasting impact beyond what anger could have accomplished. Second, true change requires both individual accountability and systemic solutions. Marcus and Brent needed personal consequences for their behavior, but the airline needed structural transformation. Neither approach alone would have been sufficient. Third, vulnerability can build authentic connection. When Jamal shared his experience with his father, it created space for honest conversation that healed their relationship. His willingness to be vulnerable at the conference similarly connected with audiences in a way technical brilliance alone couldn't have achieved. Fourth privilege creates responsibility. Elijah's resources became powerful tools for change when directed by Jamal's vision and values. Together, they demonstrated how privilege can amplify impact without overshadowing the voices of those most affected by discrimination. Finally, uncomfortable moments can become catalysts for growth. What began as humiliation evolved into a movement that improved countless lives. Jamal's story reminds us that our worst experiences, when approached with wisdom and courage, can become the foundation for our greatest contributions. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. If Jamal's journey inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and transformation. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need encouragement to turn their painful experiences into positive change. Thank you for watching, and remember, every bridge we build makes our community stronger and more connected.